kid, and welcome to this True Life KidTime StoryTime that talks about a time in America where you couldn't get married if you were a black person and a white person together. Oh, Two-Tone, yeah, I know you're black and white. No, you were never illegal. No, it was just people who, if they were black and white, were not allowed to get married. But this is a story about how all that changed. I know, kind of crazy sounding, but true. You want to check it out? Okay, the case for loving. For loving. It's kind of funny because that's their last name, but also it was a case for being able to love who you love. And let's see here. Beautiful family picture. Oh, it's Christmas time. They got a tree. Looks like we got a dad and a mom and 1, 2, 3 kids. First comes love, then comes marriage. Donald, Peggy, and Sydney, these are these guys right here, had 2 parents who loved them and who loved each other. In fact, from almost the moment Richard Loving met Mildred Jeter, they wanted to get married and have a family. But for them, it wasn't that simple. And here's why. Richard, that's him, was white. A fair-skinned boy who got quickly sunburned in July. Mildred was what they called colored back in those days, and her skin was a creamy caramel. In 1958, they lived in a small town called Central Point in Virginia, where people of every shade, from the color of chamomile tea to summer midnight, made their homes. Isn't that poetic? Summer tea, from chamomile tea to summer midnight. I like that description of colors. Richard Loving was a good, caring man. He didn't see differences. There was one person Richard loved more than the rest. Mildred Jeter. She was African American, partly, part Cherokee also. But what most folks in the Central Point noticed was how thin she was. And that's how she got her nickname, String Bean. Now when Richard popped the question, String Bean right there jumped for joy. Hearts, 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 butterflies, hearts, 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 flowers. Look at what a beautiful place they have out in the country. Looks like they have rolling hills and beautiful trees. Well, the 2 were in love, and they felt it should be their right to get married. But sadly, it was not. Not in Virginia or 16 other states. In those places, marriages between people of different races was against the law. Still, you see they had segregation. Even the water fountains, they were for whites or for colors. That's what they called black people, African American people back then. That's the term they used. And everything was separate. And they wouldn't let people marry each other. Intermarry, they called it. 100 years earlier, slavery divided America along color lines. That was back after the Civil War, remember that? Even after slavery ended, some white people weren't used to blacks being free, let alone free to marry whom they chose. If you married someone who had skin color unlike your own, you could go to jail. Jail? Yes, jail. Can you believe it? I know. But not everywhere. In 17 states, including Virginia. Now, Mildred and Richard wanted to get married, but of course, they don't want to go to prison because of it. Although they couldn't have a legal marriage in Virginia, they could right next door in Washington, D.C., where it was legal. So they invited a few friends and family to witness their wedding across state lines. At the ceremony, nobody objected when Richard said, "I do," and Mildred said, "I do," too. The Lovings were officially pronounced husband and wife. The blushing bride and her groom smiled all the way from D.C. back to their home in Virginia, and they couldn't wait to start their family. There they are at the altar. There they are walking down the aisle. There they are taking their photo. And there they are in their car, zoom, taking off back for home. But soon, something terrible happened. In the middle of the night, they were awoken from their sleep. It was the police! An officer shouted at Richard, "What are you doing with that woman?" Richard proudly pointed to their marriage certificate on the wall. But the policeman said, "That's not good here." What? Oh, and just like that, Mildred and Richard were taken away and locked up in jail. No, don't worry. That can't happen today, and it can't happen to you just because you're black and white. Oh, don't worry, Two-Tone. Now, they were charged with unlawful cohabitation. That's a big fancy word. Cohabitation means living together. Unlawful means illegal. So they were illegally living together according to the state. Now the Lovings didn't think there was anything unlawful about their love at all. If anything, the way they were treated should have been unlawful. It was just awful. After a few nights behind bars, Richard and Mildred were told they had to leave Virginia, if they wanted to live together as Mr. and Mrs. Loving. If they wanted to stay in Virginia, they were going to be told that they could not be married. Can you imagine? So, with heavy hearts, the pair hugged their families, packed their bags, right there, and left home. Now, they tried to make a life for themselves in D.C. That's where they went, to Washington, D.C., the same place they got married, the state next door. Well, the district next door. Richard found a job laying bricks, and String Bean right there gave birth to 3 babies, 3 different shades of milk chocolate brown. Peggy, Donald, and Sydney. But the city didn't suit the Lovings. There were too many cars, too much concrete. They missed Central Point with its rolling hills and open spaces. They missed their friends and their family. They missed their home. They were country folk. They liked the big, wide outdoors. City life is awesome, but it's not for everybody. They wanted to return to Virginia for good. So they hired lawyers to help fight for what is right. By now, it's 1966, and the times are changing. There's a push going on for equality and equal rights and freedom. Now, brand new ideas like equal rights for people of all colors were replacing the old, fearful ways of thinking. That's good. Fear is never a positive thing. The lawyers worked around the clock to make the case for interracial marriage as strong as possible. You understand? Interracial is the 2 races intertwining. It was time to take the Loving case all the way to what? The Supreme Court. That's right. Their case went all the way to the Supreme Court in front of all the Supreme Court justices. It was June 12th. 1967, when the case of Loving versus Virginia began. It's them versus their state, remember, because it's illegal for them to be married there. Richard and Mildred actually didn't go. They stayed at home with Donald, Peggy, and Sydney. They were very nervous, as you can imagine. They were afraid they wouldn't win because that would mean they couldn't go back home. Now, the state argued that in order to preserve the purity of the white race, blacks and whites must remain separate. Then it was the Lovings' lawyers' turn to present their case. They said it was unconstitutional to make marriage a crime because of race. And they read a message from Richard himself. Tell the court I love my wife, and it's just unfair that I can't live with her in Virginia. Tell the court I love my wife. They were listening. It didn't take long for a decision to be made. It was unanimous. The court ruled in favor of the Lovings. Interracial couples could now legally marry in Virginia. Richard and Mildred hugged. They won the right to their love, and they were free at last. Free to live at home. Over 9 years after their arrest, 9 years that they had to spend away from home, the Lovings packed their bags one final time. Richard planned to build a big, roomy brick house in Central Point, their hometown. String Bean was ready to start their life over. The Loving family returned to Virginia to live happily and legally ever after. And check this out. Look right here. I'm going to zoom in the camera so you can see a real life picture. That's Richard Loving. That's Mildred right there. And look at their 3 kids. All different colors. Look at that. And what's real interesting here too is over here, right here, that is the author. Her name is Selina, and that's her husband, Sean. And he helped draw this book. So they worked together, and I guess they were inspired because look at that. They're a black and white couple too. They're interracial. That big fancy word that we learned that means mixing the 2 races in a couple. And that was the case for Loving. Yes, that's right. So Two-Tone wants me to tell you that in this case, love wins. That's right. Love is always better than fear. Well, kid, I hope you enjoyed this story as much as Two-Tone here did. Yeah, I know. This story makes you happy. All right, kid. Remember, always be fair and always be loving. See you next time on Kid Time.